Hello again and welcome back. Fake news and fear-mongering seem to be spreading faster than COVID-19. WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, all filled with misinformation and disinformation. It often makes it difficult to separate fact from fiction. Here's an example for you. Earlier today, a 45-year-old man appearing in court in the Western Cape for allegedly spreading false information about the coronavirus. The accused posting a video on social media alleging COVID-19 testing kits were contaminated. More on this now. We're joined by William Bird via Skype. He is director at Media Monitoring Africa. William, good afternoon to you. Why at a time like this does misinformation flourish?
Good afternoon, Jeremy. It flourishes primarily because it's a situation that's ripe for myths and rumor and misinformation. So people are stressed, they're anxious. There's a disease that we're fighting that none of us can see. It's a new disease, so there's not that much known about it. We're in the middle of a lockdown. Government are passing new regulations on an almost daily basis. So there's a lot of people doing things. Our economy's going going down the toilet. So on a range of levels, there's a lot of fear and anxiety, and there are a lot of unknowns. And that's the perfect environment for people to, use that to their advantage and perpetuate myths, and also for people to, stir fear and anger and anxiety.
It can also be a security threat, William, according to some. But there's another school of thought that says we shouldn't take it too seriously because people mainly share it just for fun.
Well, no, I don't frankly believe that. The fundamental thing about disinformation that makes it so dangerous is that it places people in a position where they no longer know what's true. And the moment they no longer know what they can trust or what is credible information, it means that they are unable to make a decision. So if you don't know, for example, whether it's safe to go out to the shops in order to get food that you need for your meal, if you are unable to make an informed decision and say, well, actually there isn't a fire down the road, or there isn't this happening, or there isn't that happening, you're unable to decide and make a decision which could, determine whether your family goes hungry or not. So it's got a very real consequence on a level like that. But on a broader level, if people don't know what to do and don't know how to act, it means they can't take an informed decision. If you can't take an informed decision, it means it undermines the very basis of a democratic state. And so in that way, disinformation doesn't just undermine your ability to know and act, it undermines fundamentally democratic states.
How much of it is common sense, or are there rules? Is there a protocol in order to filter out the rubbish that some people are posting, such as the one that I've just referred to about the contaminated coronavirus tests?
So, some of it seems fairly obvious, and you think, oh, good heavens, how can anyone possibly believe this? And yet, we're not in their particular circumstance, and we've, in this particular instance, have a lot access to a lot more information. And being media people, we necessarily go to trusted media sources. So one of the first things you can do if you are unsure about anything is to ask yourself the first question: is this post making me feel fearful, anxious? Does it make me feel angry? Does it make me think that I don't know what to do? If it makes you feel any of those things, do the same thing as you do with your hands. Wash your brain for 20 seconds, think about it, and then if you have a calm decision, then you can think about sharing it. But go to other media. If eNCA is not carrying it, chances are it's probably not the same kind of story that's got any validity to it. Check other media houses. If none of them are carrying it, chances are it's completely made up, and you should then definitely not share it on.
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment. Perhaps practice a little intellectual distancing as far as that's concerned. There is a concern, though. The prevalence of fake news that we are seeing could also be used by countries, possibly including this one, to justify in the future, William Bird, new misinformation legislation that, according to some scholars, could harm academic freedom of speech.
Yes, there's no doubt. I think that the moment we saw that particular regulation about that criminalizes speech, that says if you intentionally deceive someone about this, then that should always set off warning bells. But I think it is mitigated by this, that we are in an unprecedented crisis for our democratic state. There's no doubt about that. And, this thing does pose a very real and severe threat. And government has been careful in that particular regulation to make sure that it's very carefully circumscribed. So doesn't apply to all speech. It doesn't apply to, some people and not others. It impacts in no way the ability of media to perform and fulfill their job in reporting on things. Anyone can and still should feel free to criticize, engage freely and robustly in whatever platform they like. What that does say is criminalized is if you're out to intentionally deceive someone. So it is a fundamental limitation. Yes, I don't think that's deniable. But within the context now, I think that it's probably justifiable. The real question is what happens afterwards. And that's why I think, it's important that we say, well, there's structures that we're being set up to deal with this. It's important that government is supporting, independent structures like Real 411 to allow for, complaints to be heard not within government, because that's, of course, one of the big real fears.
Just a final question to you. The platforms themselves surely have to take some responsibility. And I read this afternoon that WhatsApp, for instance, is going to impose a strict new limit on messaging or message forwarding. That's in a bid to slow down the dissemination of fake news. To be welcomed, obviously, but the platforms themselves have also got to come to the party, surely.
Yeah, they do, and to varying degrees they have in the past. They, certainly at the moment the platforms are doing what they can generally to weed out mis and disinformation about the COVID virus. They're doing that on a global scale. So, in fact, what we're seeing is the majority of complaints coming through at the moment are about WhatsApp, which is something that, the platform themselves can't actually see. So that's a very hard thing for them to do. And I guess forwarding is one of the ways that they can try and slow the spread down. But generally, I'm not sure that the platforms have done enough as yet to try and make sure that they stem these things more broadly. We've seen the difficult relationship that Facebook has had in the States in relation to comments made by the president there, and how they've dealt with certain issues around Cambridge Analytica, for example, is another thing. So, in as much as they can do more, I think that at the moment they're doing what they probably can do, and we need to support them in that. It's not going to go away if we just say, oh well, you're not doing enough anyway. So we need to all work together, I think, which is the key element around this, is that you need government and the platforms and civil society and the media to be working to combat this. No one of those parties can do this on their own.